Leanne Naylor, can't sleep, won't sleep. This is episode 128 with Lisa Victoria, our co-host in the UK Alternative Health Tools podcast, where together we discover and share new alternative health tools and resources from alternative healthcare practitioners and experts.
Welcome back to another episode of Alternative Health Tools. I'm Lisa Victoria. I'm a holistic health coach, and I'm one of your co-hosts along with John Biethan and Kim Shea. And today we're talking about sleep, can't sleep, won't sleep. And we're joined by the wonderful Leanne Naylor, who's a clinical lead in the NHS in the UK, a clinical hypnotherapist and a sleep consultant. I'm really looking forward to this episode today. I know many people who have had sleep issues or sleep challenges in the past and may be going through that now. And it's just going to be a wonderful episode today. We're going to talk about sleep myths, quality versus quantity, why sleep is so important and how it underpins our everyday living. So we're talking about mental, emotional well-being. And also we're going to share some tips and advice for our listeners today. So thank you so much, Leanne, for joining us and gifting your time to this show and our listeners. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Lisa. Yeah, thank you so much. It was lovely introduction. And thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. So my name's Leanne Naylor, everyone, and I am a clinical lead in the NHS here in the UK. I am also a therapist, hypnotherapist, and a sleep consultant.
Yeah, so why is sleep an important part of what you do and how you kind of have embedded that into your coaching programs and practices?
Yeah, okay. So it all started off really working in the NHS in mental health. I saw consistently how people I was working with for depression, psychosis, emotional dysregulation, anxiety, whatever it may be, quite often there was a sleep issue there as well, because they go hand in hand. But I was noticing that the sleep was always kind of like second in line. It was never seen as a predominant issue, which really baffled and frustrated me, if I'm honest, because if we've got poor sleep, it's going to impact our mental health. It's going to impact our physical health, our concentration, our focus, our emotional well-being. So I kind of picked up on that early on and it stayed with me for a while. But it was also, I kind of looked at the bigger picture in society as a whole and how sleep really isn't up there. We hear about dieting and exercise. We hear about, looking after yourself, self-care, self-love. But what does that really mean? And if we're not sleeping properly, not sleeping well, then we're going to be impacting all of that, our self-care, our physical well-being, our diet, our exercise, our emotional well-being, all of that is impacted by our sleep. So that's how it all began. And then I kind of looked at myself and actually thought, well, if this is something I'm going to move forwards with, am I taking all of this on board myself? And then it became apparent very quickly that I'd had my own sleep issues, and actually my sleep wasn't as good as I thought it had been. And it stemmed back to, early in my childhood, where I was a very, hyperactive child, shall we say. And then, calm down. And then as I grew up and you go through life and, life's full of curveballs, isn't it, at times? And I had some challenges, maybe some what you call toxic relationships and extra stress and maybe some anxiety as well, a bit of low mood. My sleep, I noticed a pattern there where it was linked. My sleep would just be completely horrendous. And at one point, I wasn't sleeping any more than sort of 20 minutes every hour. And that went on for months. Yeah. How I managed to continue working and surviving at all, I don't know, but I did. And it really was a big wake-up call to actually, I need to look at sleep more myself and for other people. This is really, really important here. I nearly lost everything because I couldn't sleep. And I had so much emotional and trauma work, if you like, to do from previous relationships that I'd kind of left. but I'd push them to the back of my mind and not let go of them. And then whenever a big stressful event came up, like moving house or what have you, my sleep would be impacted, and then all that would come back, flashbacks, nightmares, kind of thing. So it's all interlinked. And that was the other part to it, is that pushing things away, not dealing with them, can only work for so long with all of us. We have
Amazing.
to deal. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, and what a journey, and huge insights there into sleep patterns and how they interact with other elements of health. And exactly as you've said there, if we push things to the back of our minds, at some point it's going to come and tap you on the shoulder and remind you that it's still there if it's past trauma that you've not dealt with, in your words. And sleep absolutely fascinates me. I resonate with what you're saying. I've been through periods in my life where I've not slept, and usually they're periods of kind of heightened stress, or the external environment changing, and how we respond to that impacts on our sleep, doesn't it? So yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for exploring this topic for us, because I'm sure our listeners out there are probably thinking, well, yeah, I can resonate with some of that too. So and one of the questions I want to ask you, and it might not be relevant now, but I was just thinking about, these electronic devices, the smartwatches now that people wear for sleep and monitoring their sleep. And I mean, what are your thoughts on those? Do they give good feedback, or is it feedback that should be taken with a pinch of salt? Because actually, we're talking about sleep myths next. It's quality versus quantity, and do we get the right feedback from those devices?
Exactly. It's all about quality rather than quantity. Now, it's a little bit of both, to be completely honest. So, for example, ideally, the average adult really requires between 7 to 9 hours in every 24 in terms of the amount, give or take a little bit. If you're sleeping something like 12, 13, 14, 15 hours a night, then I'd be wanting to review that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a little bit too much. And again, if you're only sleeping 4 hours a night, you might be okay doing that. But is that really sustainable long term, is what you need to be thinking about.
Yes.
Usually no, is the answer.
I used to work with a gentleman, you're talking about sleeping little, and he averaged about 3.5, 4 hours a night. And he said, I feel fine, and was drinking lots of coffee. And I was thinking, surely at some point this isn't going to end very well. This was years ago. This colleague, I don't actually know, I haven't spoken to him for a long time, but I just remember thinking, surely that's not sustainable. And that's exactly what you're saying, isn't it? Is being aware, I guess.
And the thing is, because some people have done it for such a long time, they'll say, well, yeah, I'm fine. I've been doing it for, say, 5, 10 years or 20 years, 30 years, whatever. And okay, you might be okay now, but there is going to come a point where things will start to show up. And that will be as a consequence of the fact that you're not having either enough or good quality sleep. And that can show up in physical format, not just emotionally or feeling moody and grumpy. Sleep is the only time that our body is able to repair and restore itself. There's no other time in our life, only when we're sleeping. And particularly in certain stages of our sleep as well. So if we're only sleeping, say, for 3 hours, we're not going to be getting all the stages of sleep, which means you're not going to be getting good quality sleep, and you're certainly not going to be repairing and restoring all your bodily organs, your cells, everything. Your liver, your kidneys, your heart, your mind, processing memories, thoughts, feelings, etc. So, it really, really is so important. And in terms of the quality, it's about waking up feeling refreshed, feeling like you've had a good sleep. And if you're not feeling like that, or you haven't felt that for a long time, or you can't even remember when you last woke up feeling nice and refreshed from a good sleep, again, I'd be saying, hey, I think you need to have a look at this.
Amazing. What great advice. And I think that's one for our listeners, isn't it? To think about, do I feel refreshed in the morning, rather than have I had 7, 8, 9 hours sleep? And that's okay. It's how are you feeling in the morning? Is that the proper feedback kind of measure, you would say, is a good indicator as to if their sleep's good enough?
Yeah, it's one of them. It's one of the indicators I look for. I want people to wake up feeling refreshed, energized, confident, happy, a little bit of a spring in their step, if you like. You don't necessarily have to be jumping out of bed, but to feel like, I've had a really good sleep. That was good. Let's go on with the day. Because all of those things, if you're having a good sleep, you should be feeling. And going back to your original point about sleep apps and things, it's a little bit of a grey area for me. Because, number one, I'm all for less gadgets, less medication. Let's look at this from a holistic point of view. And number two, they can help. Okay, they can help to a certain extent, but like you said, I would definitely advise people to take it with a pinch of salt, because they're not that accurate. They're not in your mind. So unless they are, they're not going to pick up everything. You've got to think about things like, it might say that you've woken at this time because it's heard a noise in your room. Well, that could be you ruffling the duvet. It could be the dog barking. It could be the neighbours banging downstairs if they and they're building in the middle of the night or whatever. It could say sometimes it will get the different stages of sleep wrong. Sometimes it's good to look at in that respect. So I have had people come to me and say, look, Leanne, I'm sleeping 9 hours, but I'm waking and feeling like I'm not sleeping at all. My sleep app's showing me this. And that can give you a little bit of an indication that maybe they're not getting enough deep sleep, good quality sleep, the restorative sleep. But it's not that accurate still. So it can be, I'd use it, like you say, as a pinch of salt and a guide, a very kind of loosely fitted guide. I wouldn't rely on them at all, not even the state-of-the-art ones. I won't mention any names. No. Don't want to get into trouble. But yeah, by all means use them. If you think that you're waking in the night and you're not quite sure, they're quite good for that. So, some people think they might be talking in their sleep a lot and moving around a lot, but it will pick up things like that. Yeah. That's positive, that's good, because you can learn from that.
And actually, I think that's a really good point you've made there. Somebody's got kind of maybe some anxiety relating to sleep and they think they've not slept at all. Actually, the app could say you were actually asleep for X amount of time. So it might actually give them some positive reinforcement to know that actually their thoughts about how they sleep are actually unfounded and they're actually getting some sleep. That might give them some more confidence to go to sleep, but it's kind of on a more of a superficial level is what I'm hearing from you. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And you've really, spot on there. It can help reassure people as well, particularly in those situations. But, just don't rely
a bit
too
like
heavy
Dr.
on
Google.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, Dr. Google.
I was working with a doctor's practice the other day and I went into an aged doctor's room and she had a mug on her desk and she said, please don't mistake Google for my medical degree. And don't confuse the two. And I just thought that was wonderful.
Absolutely
I just
love
thought,
that.
These professionals have trained for ages and then we always do a search engine, don't we? And it's got some wonderful information on there, but always speak to an expert, I think is the point we're saying here. There's other wonderful tools out there to give us guidance, but actually getting to the bottom of it with an expert is really good. And we talked about the quality versus quantity, but you touched on there about the different stages of sleep. And, I'm aware of from the training that I've done, different stages of sleep. But for the benefit of our listeners, shall we just share a little bit about the stages of sleep and why they're important?
Yeah, sure, because it's really good information to know and it gives you a good sort of baseline insight into sleep. So sleep, we have what we call a sleep cycle, okay, and this can vary between person because of our internal body clock. So you kind of follow this, but there's a bit of individuality to it as well. So you've got roughly, say, 5 stages. Okay, now this is arguable. Some people say 6. It depends. But let's stick with 5 for now. And the first stage is the initial stage when you're in bed and you're sort of drifting between consciousness and sleep. You're kind of drifting off, if you like. And then you kind of move into stage 2, roughly sort of varies again between person, but around about 5-15 minutes. Then depends how tired you are, into stage 2. And this is where you'll start to feel or find, if you're still slightly conscious and aware at this point, of your heart rate slowing down, your brain's starting to do less complicated tasks, so that's starting to slow down as well. And then again, moving on to stage 3 and sort of 15 minutes or so later. This is where you start to go into non-REM sleep. So that's non-rapid eye movement sleep. Okay, the delta stage. Some of you may have heard of that. And this is where the body's starting to make repairs. So like I was talking about earlier, sleep being our time to repair and restore, this is where it starts to begin. And then we kind of move on over to stage 4. And this is where the body temperature and your blood pressure starts to drop as well. So we're starting to cool down, starting to really, really kind of relax now. And just, feel ourselves, our arms and our limbs a little bit sort of heavier. You're still kind of slightly with it. And then you're going to move into stage 5. Okay. And this is where, just roughly around sort of 90 minutes after we first kind of gone to sleep or started to feel sleepy. And in stage 5, this is where REM takes place. That is your rapid eye movement. Okay. And this is where you'll find an increase in eye movement, heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, your temperature, and you're more likely to dream in this state. It's also the stage where you're more likely to have lucid dreams as well. Some people might have heard of those or be wondering if they exist. Yes, they do exist. I just thought I'd drop that in there as well. So that's your basic sleep cycle, if you like, and what happens at each stage. So you can see just based on that if somebody is only getting 20 minutes every hour or 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there, or a couple of hours, they're not going to be able to go through those stages fully. Not only that, we actually cycle through those stages several times through the course of the night in order to repair and restore on each cycle. So if you're only sleeping for, say, an hour at a time, or an hour at all, you're not even going to get through the full 5 stages properly, never mind to do any more than one cycle of it. So, it just shows, doesn't it, from a physiological point of view, how important sleep is.
It's really interesting. I remember reading a book by Stephen Walker. I think we talked about it, didn't we? And one of the things that kind of stuck in my mind was he told a story about a person who was quite sleep deprived and they felt fine, which we were talking about earlier. And actually, when they monitored and measured their reactions, they were just as poor at reacting whilst driving as somebody who was over the legal alcohol limit. And I just found that really fascinating. It stuck with me for so long because it's that illusion of we feel fine, but actually, are we really operating mentally, physically, emotionally at the level not only for our own safety and well-being, but for others as well? And I just remember that really sticking with me. And I love how you've described the cycles there. That was really brilliant. Thank you so much, and very insightful. And it's really important, isn't it, to go through those cycles and make sure we're getting enough of them uninterrupted as well, because they each play a part, don't they, in our health and well-being.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And what you were saying there about the reaction time and things, it's so true. I mean, the book is amazing. And if anyone hasn't read that book, I would suggest that you do if you really want to find out some more about your sleep and understand sleep and its importance and how it works.
I'll put a link in the show notes for any of our listeners, so
that would
they
be
can. Yeah.
And also, and that's why, talking about reactions and things, sleep can, if we're not getting good quality sleep, then it can and often will impact our concentration, our focus, our reaction times, our ability to self-regulate, both emotionally and physiologically. It impacts our ability to communicate, socialise, have relationships generally. I mean, imagine you run a business, or you're in a boardroom exec meeting, or team manager with a colleague. If you're not sleeping properly, the chances of you turning moody very quickly is very high. So, thinking about that, how you might not be very quick at reacting in terms of physical ability, like driving, or athletes and being in the gym and training, lifting weights, running, what have you. But in terms of your reaction emotionally in social situations, it can go the opposite way.
Go very quickly. And we can snap. And haven't we all experienced that at some point when we've been, especially with jet lag, right? It's like, oh God, that jet lag. It's just that you can feel it, can't you? And you just feel like you're really agitated, and anything anybody says, it's almost like it could aggravate you, couldn't it, in the wrong way?
Yeah. And funny you mentioned jet lag, actually, because that reminds me of a time when I flew to Las Vegas, ironically the place that never sleeps, right? And the flight had been delayed. I didn't really sleep too well on the plane because it was a really busy flight. I remember getting off the plane and the people I was with all excited, and I just put my sunglasses on. I was like, don't even talk to me. Don't even talk to me. Leave me alone. So, that was because I hadn't had my sleep. So, yeah.
Not available for interaction right now.
Oh, I love that. That's brilliant. I might get that and put it on my door. So, sleep. I'm talking about what we're saying about reactions and sleep, and it's important, it's also linked to things like slower walking. If you're into weightlifting, for example, I love CrossFit, so this was a big one for me as well, is it can actually impact your grip strength as well. Not only the weight that you lift and your posture, but also your grip strength and greater difficulties at performing independent tasks as well. And interestingly, the research on that latter bit is more, unfortunately, sorry ladies of a certain age, but it's heavily weighted to ladies middle-aged and over, where it impacts us more.
Interesting.
So any ladies sort of 40s, 50s and above listening to this, just bear that in mind when you're down the gym or walking or doing anything physical. Make sure you get your sleep in.
And that's a really interesting point there you bring up. It's ladies of a certain age. So actually, from your experience of working with clients, do people typically, apart from if there's anything external going on in life, the events that might happen that perhaps, trigger an emotional response, which can then impact on our sleep, are there any kind of patterns in terms of people's age or gender that you kind of see coming through? Do people have challenges at different times in their life, and is there anything that they can do to kind of preempt themselves for those and help their health and well-being as they approach that time in their life? Is there something physiological going on as well?
That's a good question. I mean, my clients, I work with clients who have got a sleep issue or sleep problem, whether it's insomnia or sleep disturbance of some kind. It's not just insomnia, but just a sleep issue. Maybe they're just struggling to get to sleep because they've got lots of thoughts on their mind or something, where there isn't a physiological issue underpinning it. And usually there isn't anyway, because sleep's innate, okay? We're born to sleep. If you see, anyone who's got children will know that even if they don't sleep at night, they will fall asleep in the high chair, they'll fall asleep in the car, they'll fall asleep in the buggy, on the train, wherever it may be, they'll fall asleep, right? They don't go, oh, I'm not going to sleep now. It doesn't work like that. They'll just fall asleep whenever they need to because it's innate. We're born with it. Whereas things like insomnia is learned. It's a learned behaviour. Okay, so all the clients I work with, there is no physiological reason underlying it. Now, for some people, there might be if they've had like a brain injury or something like that. Mm-hmm. That's slightly different. Okay, because there could be an issue there with the brain. If it's not due to something like that, it's a learned behaviour. Now, when I say a learnt behaviour, I don't mean you've gone out there and purposefully learnt how not to sleep. Obviously not. It's something we've done usually to protect ourselves. So, because there's an emotional issue underlying it of some description. And that could be a fear of going to sleep because we've had a traumatic experience at night time or scared of the dark for some reason. Anxiety. And that could be anxiety because we're an anxious person. And we've got anxiety because of something we've experienced in the past, some kind of trauma. It could be that we've got anxiety about going to sleep because that's an actual issue in itself, which is called somophobia, I think. Yeah, it could be things like feeling stressed. You might have a really stressful job, particularly at the moment in the current climate. People having to really change and pivot their working lives to being more or less completely online, where we are here in the UK at the moment because we're in lockdown. So all the challenges that brings, the extra stresses that can bring, as well as some positives. There's a lot of people working from home with children right now. That's
Good
stressful,
luck.
isn't it? Yeah, good luck, everyone. So, all those challenges that life's bringing and throwing at us at the moment is enough to throw anyone's sort of sleep and stress off kilter, So they're the kind of things that I see often. And in terms of age, I work with all different ages. I don't say no to people. I want to help people with their sleep. And the earlier that's recognised and dealt with, the better, as with anything. But in terms of pattern, I would say women sort of 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that kind of, and that's a large bracket, but that's the one where the median is, if you like. You've got their own businesses, or they're quite, they're high achieving, and they've had a sleep problem for almost as long as they can remember. But when I pin them down to it, go, how long has this been going on for? Oh, well, a few years. And then we get into the nitty gritty, and it's been like, right, well, I don't remember when I last woke up feeling refreshed, or it was before I had children. That's quite a common one. Okay, how old are your kids? 20 and 25. Right then.
Wow.
But we need to look at this, don't we? And it might think, oh, well, I've just struggled getting to sleep. I'll toss and turn for a few minutes or half an hour or even a couple of hours, and then I'll wake up at 4, and I might go back to sleep at 6. All that kind of stuff, which people go, oh, it's just life. I'm just used to it.
Yes.
Okay, you're used to it, great, because you just got on with life.
And unfortunately, it's become their new norm, hasn't it? So they've just accepted it as, well, I sleep okay, but actually compared to what? And when exactly you take them back to when they used to sleep really well, there's probably going to be a huge gap, or a gap to an extent.
Yeah. And of course, over that period of time, that way of sleeping, or lack of, becomes the norm, like you said. And the brain loves what is familiar. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, it just loves what's familiar. So, hence why people form addiction so easily to things, because, the brain doesn't recognise it's right or wrong. It just, when a behaviour becomes familiar, it loves it. It thrives on routine and structure and consistency. Again, that's innate, routine, and what we need for routine and structure. So, if it becomes your norm that you take 2 hours to get to sleep, you wake up several times a night, then you're just going to think, oh, well, it's not until you stop and think and reflect and become fully aware, actually, this isn't right, or this needs to improve. I need to do something about this, that you realise, let's really look at this and maybe sort of reflect and become really aware of what's going on. And I think that's the first step, is the awareness.
It's huge, isn't it? It's the awareness for general health, I think, as well as we're talking about sleep, because quite often when I see clients, they come to me when it's got too bad, rather than when they've had the signs over the years kind of just knocking on their door. And it's at that pain point, isn't it? Is when it gets bad enough that you actually want to do something about it. And
exactly that.
I think what we're saying today is to question your sleep and your sleep quality. How are you feeling in the morning? Are you getting enough? Do you think that you're getting through enough of the cycles in the evening? And actually challenge yourself and ask yourself that question, and maybe just take some time to reflect on that, because certainly from my experiences, we can always sleep better.
Oh,
and
definitely.
I've had periods in my life where I've not slept very well with the chronic fatigue. And exactly as you described earlier, I could be sleeping 14, 15 hours a day and still not waking up feeling refreshed. And it's huge, isn't it? It's something underlying is going on. And I've kind of been on my own journey, and, currently I'm sleeping very well and I have a good relationship with sleep, which is amazing. But I have been, on the other side of the coin where I've not slept well. So I think what we're saying to people is don't leave it as late as I left it, where I ended up with chronic fatigue, and actually just start to challenge your sleep now by asking yourself the question is, what's my sleep like? How do I feel about sleep? Am I, you said earlier, some people are anxious about going to sleep, or they're fearful of the dark, or based on past experiences. So I think that'd be a lovely exercise for our listeners to do, is just to take a moment to reflect on actually what is going on for them and is it good enough?
Oh, definitely. I encourage all my clients to reflect on their sleep and really think about it, and actually work with them and ask them questioning, if you like, to get them to really think about these things. And then they go, oh yeah, and this. I'm like, here we go, it's all coming out now. And to keep like a sleep diary, that's a good one, because, you know, sometimes I can't hold it all in my head, and I wouldn't want you to, because the more you hold in your head, the less chance you'll be able to sleep easily anyway. So
I've got to remember to tell Leanne this. I can't sleep.
Exactly. Contradictory, hey. So yeah, write these things down, definitely. Keep a journal, keep a log, just like a bullet point in a notepad. It doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Yeah.
Just writing it
down. Get it down on paper so they can give you as much information.
Yeah, it frees the mind to then think more logically, think calmer, and therefore sleep easier.
That's wonderful. I'm just circling back to one of the things you said, that sleep's innate, but insomnia's learnt. And, you know, I think that moves us quite nicely into the kind of tips and advice which we've already started doing, and asking them to think about creating a sleep journal or sleep notes, whatever that looks like for them, just to start to create something that they can reflect on. So what other tips and advice have you got for our wonderful listeners?
Okay, so definitely, yeah, if you haven't reflected on your sleep, and this is making you think about it a little bit more, which I hope it is, definitely make a note of it. Keep a notepad and a pen or pencil by the bed, and I'm specific on that, folks. Pen and paper, please. I know it's old-fashioned, but leads me on to point 2, gadgets, okay? Now, we've all got a phone. Most of us have a mobile phone, all of that, iPad, TV, laptop, great, wonderful things. But when it comes to sleep, if you're struggling with your sleep particularly, you need all those things away from you. I don't want any TVs in the bedroom. I certainly don't want them on. As for mobile phones, if you use them as an alarm, hands up, I do, then that's fine. But keep it face down, so there's no light radiating off it during the night, or if any notifications come through. Also, keep it on the floor, so out of sight, out of mind, no lights off it, at least an hour, absolute minimum, ideally 2 hours of no gadgets before bed. Okay, no TV, no phone, no iPad, no laptop. And if you're thinking, oh, what should I do there in that time? Read an actual book. Or just lay there and, you know, do a little meditation. Maybe think about, you know, whatever you like to think about, going to a beach, or what a good sleep looks like for you, because that's very individual. And then I would also say routine. Okay, so we've got sleep journal, we've got removal of gadgets. Okay, and tip number 3 is routine, and by that I mean a daily routine. First, start off with that first before we even get to a nighttime routine. You need to have a daytime routine to begin with, because if you haven't, you're going to really struggle to then implement a nighttime routine, okay, because they interlink. So start with a daytime routine. If you've got a daytime routine and you think it's all sorted and it's working well for you, that's great. Get yourself a nice sleep time routine and keep it consistent. And by that, I mean every single day. If you've got a sleep problem, there's no point in putting a routine together Monday to Friday when you're working and then chucking it out the window come the weekend. You know, it's like being on a diet, isn't it? You starve yourself and eat lettuce leaves all week, and then you're pigging out on KFC all weekend and wondering why you've not lost any weight. I mean, it's the same with sleep, guys, okay? If you want to get your sleep where it needs to be, you need to get yourself a good routine. And okay, once it's sorted, you can be a bit more flexible with it. That's fine. But in the beginning, consistent routine, 7 days a week is needed. So going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. And having a bit of self-care time before bed is good. Whether it's a nice bath, moisturising yourself, just listening to a little bit of music or something like that. Whatever you like to do, reading, having that downtime so you can calm down the solar plexus and the nervous system, and things like the vagus nerve and all of that. I won't go too much into that now because that's a whole new topic. But, you know, just to calm down the senses and things is really useful. And don't eat too close to bed. So I know back in the day, my grandma used to say to me, oh, here's a nice hot cup of milk and a biscuit before bed. No. Yes, milk's got a chemical in it which can potentially aid your sleep. But at the same time, what it does is it fires up the digestive system. It's like fuel for the body, isn't it? We don't want that. We're relaxing, we're calming.
Yes.
The digestive system needs a sleep time to repair and rejuvenate itself and move any toxins out of the body. So, make sure you have your evening meal a good sort of 3 hours before you're planning on going to bed. Don't have any snacks and biscuits before bed, and make sure you're hydrated. Yeah.
Simple. It sounds so simple, but some wonderful tips and tools there. And yeah, we say it sounds simple, but in practice, it does take a little bit of conscious thought, doesn't it?
Yes,
to start becoming aware of what is your current routine. Do you have a routine? If you do have one, challenge it. If you don't have one, think about creating one. And all the wonderful kind of tips that Leanne has given us is how can you start embedding them into your routine. And you've touched on nutrition there, you've talked about rest and relaxation, and they're all fundamental parts of holistic health, really, aren't they, in terms of calming us down, ready for sleep. I think it's just wonderful. And it's so important, isn't it, to get those foundations in place. And I chuckle because, quite often when I work with clients, they say, oh, yeah, I've been really good all week, but actually on the weekend I did da da da. And you think, no, because it's about creating that routine. And like you say, once you've got that routine, then you can introduce a little bit of flexibility. So I think the message to our listeners is, if you've got something going on that you want to address, then actually having that consistent routine to start with is going to really, really pay off in the long run.
Yeah, it is. And that's where it starts, really, from a practical sense. It's all about, like you're saying earlier, when people decide, you hit the nail on the head there, Lisa. It's when people decide to decide. Because, you've got to want this. You've got to want to put in the effort, whether that's practical tips, routines, having therapy to undo anything that's negatively holding you back, emotionally, mentally, and potentially physiologically as well. You've got to want it, and you've got to be willing and committed and motivated to want the change.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so important. It's a really important point, because I think it's so easy, isn't it, to take a sleeping tablet and hope that's going to fix the issue. But actually, we're treating the symptom, not the cause. And all the tips you've given is getting back to that root cause and putting the foundations in place, so you don't have to then take something that's not natural to manage the symptom. And what we're trying to do here is get to the root cause and create that wonderful foundation of beautiful sleep. Yeah,
definitely. It's all about getting to the root cause. Medication's got its place, don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-medication, but I am a little bit anti-medication when it concerns sleep, because I know you don't need it. And actually, it's a plaster to the wound. It doesn't deal with the root cause at all, and can actually end up leading you to having secondary issues with the medication side of things. So, you don't need that. There's lots of things you can do without needing to resort to medication.
And that goes back to your point, doesn't it, about wanting the change? Because actually it's so easy to take a tablet just before bed, but actually it's a little bit more of conscious effort to start putting different foundations in place, because we have to think about a routine. We have to actually do things differently, which does take a little bit of conscious choice, doesn't it? So, exactly like you said, there's a time and a place for medication, but it's then looking at how you can support yourself long term.
That's it, yeah. And these things, people often think that because we live in such a fast-paced society, everybody wants everything done yesterday, right? So that's why medication, in a way, the most preferred option for a lot of people, because they just want to resolve it at the click of a finger. But what they're not realising is that it's not resolving it. Like I'm saying, it's a plaster to the wound. And then you talk about therapy and things, and people have this idea that therapy is something that has to go on for months or years even. And that's not always the case. And particularly with sleep, I work with people all the time, like I was saying earlier, who've had sleep issues for decades. And they've come to me, we've worked together, and over a few sessions, usually only around sort of a handful of sessions at that, so maybe a couple more, the sleep's completely resolved. They're now sleeping all the way through night, feeling refreshed, feeling, wonderful upon waking. I had a lady recently who came back to me. She, what did she say to me? She messaged me and she said, "Leanne, I wish to complain that this sleep thing isn't working. I woke up at 8:55 a.m. and I was asleep by 11:30 p.m. Fortunately, I wasn't having an early start. How amazing was that?" Now, for this particular lady, this is a lady who hadn't slept properly for over 3 decades. And she just slept from 11:30 p.m. straight through till 5 to 9 in the morning.
Amazing.
For the first time ever since she can remember. And we were literally, we worked together. I think she had about 4 sessions. Yeah, that was really good. That was a really quick turnaround there. So you see, it doesn't have to be this long-term seeing a therapist every week for the next year or two. Therapy can be quick too.
And I guess you got that result just by using the tips and tools that you shared with the listeners today, but making it bespoke to her situation and working with her on what was going on in her life and looking at lifestyle and things like that and making sure that those foundations were in place.
Exactly. So it was a combination of the practical strategies, most of which we've talked about today, and some others, the mindset work, therapy, all combined together with a bit of energy work as well. I find that's really key as well, looking at the energy. So combining all of that together during our sessions and our work together gets these incredible results.
That's phenomenal. Yeah. I think, gosh, it just kind of sums it up amazingly well, doesn't it? That actually there's hope. If you're not sleeping, there's hope out there for you. And it doesn't have to just be, in your words, putting a plaster on the wound. It's getting to the root cause of the issue and resolving it and taking away all that resistance. It doesn't have to be difficult, does it?
Yeah. No, it's all not at all.
I mean,
no.
It's like 3 decades of not sleeping, and then she's sleeping for that block of time. It's like, wow, if only she'd met you earlier, that would have been so wonderful.
Yeah. I know, and she said that, and we're still, we're still in touch now. It's lovely, and she's very grateful, which is nice. So yeah, like I say, it doesn't have to be that hard. It really doesn't. We need to take this notion away from it being difficult, and I think sometimes that's because people put sleep on a pedestal. We're born with it. It's part of us, Just look inwards. It's there. The answer always lies within.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Leanne. Is there anything else you want to kind of share with our listeners, or just to wrap up, how would you kind of sum it up for them?
I would just like to sort of reiterate really that, sleep is innate. Okay, we're born with it. Insomnia and most, if not all, of our sleep issues, getting sleep, waking in the night, what have you, they're all learned. So if we can learn it, we can unlearn it. And it doesn't have to be hard.
Amazing.
It can actually be relatively easy. So yeah, the answer always lies within.
I like that. The answer always lies within, and it's not that difficult. So if anybody's struggling out there and this podcast resonated with them, Leanne runs some wonderful complimentary sleep groups in Facebook, the Sleep Hub. So if you want to get in contact with Leanne, it's leannenaylor.com, and that website will be in the show notes, but it's Leanne, LeanneNaylor.com, and you can get in contact with her and ask her any questions, and also join her free sleep group on Facebook, which I know is just amazing. And I just want to thank you so much, Leanne, for your time today and your knowledge and your wisdom and your insights, because it's been really informative. And I think what I've heard today is it's actually take the pressure off. It doesn't have to be that difficult. And there's really simple, effective tools that you've got in your toolbox that you can share with people to help them sleep better, which is just going to affect the whole of their life, which is just amazing. So why wouldn't you want to sleep better when you can have, a healthier, happier life as a result?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly that.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Lisa Victoria. I'm your co-host from across the pond in the UK. And whenever you're listening to this podcast, I wish you a wonderful night's sleep ahead. Until next time, if you loved what you've heard, then please share our podcasts with your friends. You can find us on Google, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. And equally, if you want to share any kind of stories you've got in relation to sleep, then you can go on to alternativehealthtools.com and go to this episode and just click on the blue microphone and you can leave us a voice note. We'd love to hear from you and how you've enjoyed this podcast. So until next time, I'm Lisa Victoria. Take care. Bye-bye.
Produced by Heard Not Seen Media. Visit imaginepodcasting.com for more information.